Hey there, I'm Debbie. I'm a marketer with a passion for helping folks understand and make the most of SEO for their businesses. Over the next few lessons, I'll walk you through one of the key components to getting started with SEO, link building. Let's jump right in. So, what exactly are links? Let's say we're reading an article about tennis rackets. You'll notice that some text is in blue. If you click on the first link, we'll be sent to a page that's on the tennismarket.com domain. This is known as an internal link. But if we click on the second link, we'll be directed to an entirely different website. We call that a site B. That's an external link. Now, if my website were site B, I could say that I have a backlink from tennismarket.com going to my page, and vice versa. If Nat's tennis talk linked back to tennismarket.com, that would be a backlink for Tennis Market. When one website links to another, by default, it's establishing a relationship with the linked page. With the previous example, my link to Site B shows search engines that I'm recommending this page to my readers. Now, there might be times where you'll want to specify your client's relationship with the link. The three main ones are sponsored links, user-generated content, or UGC, and nofollow. To specify these to Google, you'll need to add what we call rel attributes to your links. When you add a link in the Wix Studio editor, you can add that by going to your advanced SEO settings and checking off the ones you want. So let's go through them. The sponsored link attribute is used when someone pays me to link to their site. For example, if a website pays me to show their ad on my site and link to their homepage, I should add the sponsored link attribute to the link so Google understands my relationship with this company. According to Google, buying or selling links does not violate their policies, provided that they are accompanied by the sponsored tag. If I let people post their own content on my site, I can use the user-generated content attribute for those links. Social media platforms tend to add this attribute to their links since their platforms are filled with user-generated content. And if you use apps like blog or forum on Wix Studio, the rel UGC attribute will be added automatically. And the nofollow attribute is the catch-all link attribute that can be added to links that you don't want to be connected to your website. For example, if your client uses a free design template for their website, it may have a link to that designer's website to give them credit for their work. That link can be marked as nofollow so that your client gives the designer credit while showing Google that the link isn't meant to be a recommendation of the designer. You can also combine these attributes where it makes sense. Let's think about why link building is important from the perspective of someone who is reading the tennis racket article we looked at before. As a reader, this might be my first time coming across some of the more niche information in the article, and I might want to learn more. Links, both internal and external, can help give me more context. Now, how about from a search engine's point of view? Check out this graphic. Let's say every circle represents a website, and the dotted lines represent backlinks. Links can help increase a site's discoverability, and they can help search engines come across new pages that they may not have crawled before. Links can also be a proxy for your EAT, or experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness, which you can learn more about in the keyword research module of this course. When other sites link to your client's content about a certain topic, they're essentially signaling that that page did a good job covering the topic. Lastly, let's look at this from the point of view of your clients. As I just mentioned, links can help site owners establish credibility, which can also help with your clients' rankings on search engines. And when their rankings improve, so does their visibility, because their site will start showing up more often at the top of the SERPs. Overall, backlinks can help increase traffic to their website, which means more signups and conversions for your clients, helping you deliver the results that they want to see. Now that you understand the importance of link building, resist the urge to solely focus on it for your client's website. Links are just one of many factors Google considers. Sites can't always win with links alone. You need to be on top of performance, like slow load times. And of course, they need to have quality content worth linking to and that matches the search intent for the keywords they're trying to target, which is what we'll cover in our next lesson. See you there. Not all links are created equally. So determining what's a good link really depends on your client's goals. In this lesson, you'll learn how to separate the good links from the bad. Let's start with an example. Say your client's goal is to receive referral traffic from other websites. You'll want to focus on building links from relevant websites that your client's audience also reads. You might also prioritize getting links from websites that already have high traffic. Depending on which link building tactic you use, you'll define a good link slightly differently. Another example. If you're doing digital PR, a link that has a rel nofollow attribute may still be considered a good link, even though the link may not impact your rankings. Think of a popular news site. They publish tons of news articles, but many of their links are nofollow by default. Despite this, getting a link from this news site means people may click the link and go to your client's website. This one link impacts the visibility of your client's page, which increases the chances another site might link to your client without the nofollow attribute. No matter what your client's goals are, links from relevant sites will always be beneficial. So if they own a flower shop, a link from a local wedding planner's website will always be more valuable than, say, a link from a local sporting goods store. Before we go any further, it's important to understand what search engines like Google have said about link building. Specifically, you'll need to understand their link spam policies so you know what to avoid doing to prevent any issues or penalties down the line. So, in their spam policy, Google says, Google uses links as an important factor in determining the relevancy of web pages. Any links that are intended to manipulate rankings in Google search results may be considered link spam. And they give a few examples of link spam. I went ahead and organized them into a few key rules, starting with don't bribe. If your client has a product or service, they should not be exchanging it for a backlink. Or if you get an email or see an ad offering to sell you links, avoid them. Even if you're not directly bribing someone, it's still a red flag. But say your client sponsors an event and the event holder links to their website. That website should add the rel sponsored link attribute to clarify to Google that the link is due to a sponsorship, not a bribe. Next up, don't force it. This means that you should avoid creating widgets or badges for your clients that contain an embedded link to their site. On the surface, they may be able to get a lot of links. For example, your client creates a list of top 100 travel blogs and a badge. The intention is that the blogs listed will add the badge to their site that contains a link to your client's list. But in reality, the links from those travel blogs aren't really providing any value to their readers. They're just showcasing that they were mentioned. This is different from recommending someone else's content because it provides good insight. Since this is considered an easy way to spin up links that aren't very valuable, it's seen as manipulative. And this goes without saying, but you should never threaten someone to link to your client's site either. And lastly, don't spam. In general, you should avoid link building on low quality or spammy websites. But you should also avoid spamming sites that rely on user-generated content, like forums and blog comments. Google also says that you should avoid excessive link exchange. Let's say you have a client that gets an offer to swap 100 links with another site. Google will see that as inorganic and potentially spammy. Google's algorithms have a good understanding of your link profile and will try to ignore large-scale link exchanges. If most of your links are through this tactic, it can lead to a manual action. For more on this, check out Google Search Central's documentation on spam policies for Google Web Search. I'll link to it in the description below. Remember that link building isn't an easy task, and most shortcuts likely aren't worth it. It may be tempting to jump at ads for quality links at a low price, but those links may be from websites that Google knows are spammy and already ignores their links. Worst case scenario, your client's site could end up with a manual action due to being associated with one of those sites. So if a link building tactic sounds too good to be true, it probably is. But don't worry, we'll cover a number of ways to build links throughout this course. Up next, we'll talk about how you can find opportunities for high quality links. I'll meet you there. In this lesson, we'll cover where we want our link to come from and what to keep in mind when reaching out to those websites. First, let's talk about what mindset you should have when you approach link building. When you're first starting out with a link strategy, it's easy to slip into some common bad habits, like emailing as many people as possible to get a link to your website. To find relevant opportunities, there are two approaches I recommend. We'll talk about both of them in depth in this lesson. But to sum them up, first, identify who the link givers are in your client's industry, and then help your client create content that those link givers are likely to link to. One type of link givers are industry news sites and trade publications that write articles that cover topics related to a particular industry. In advertising, it'll be sites like Adweek and Advertising Age. They may talk about a certain advertising campaign and link to the brand that ran the campaign. The second type of link givers are industry-relevant blogs. On one end of the spectrum are blogs that belong to companies or individuals who are thought leaders in a particular space. For the self-help industry, it may be Tony Robbins or Simon Sinek's blog. At the other end of the spectrum would be more niche blogs in an industry. These aren't the big names, but may be link givers for various reasons, like they perhaps want to quote a subject matter expert in their content. The second strategy is to identify who the link receivers in your client's industry are. These will be the blogs that are competing for the same keywords as your client. Identify which types of their pages get links, then create content based on that. For example, a link receiver might be tennisnuts.com, which sells sporting goods. Through checking the backlink profile, you can find out which pages on the site receive the most links and use that as a basis for your client's content. You can then pair your backlink strategy with your keyword content strategy from the keyword research module. For example, let's say the racket buying guide received lots of links. You could consider doing something similar for your client and create several buying guides to cover different intents. For both approaches, remember that you're trying to identify what content your client can add to their website that creates value. Without value, there's no reason for anyone to link to your client's pages. Identifying the link givers starts with finding out what websites your client's target audience trusts or blogs they might regularly read. To do this, you can search keywords like top publications in industry or top industry blogs to see which sites are mentioned. Detail.com also ranks the top blogs in various niches, so that's a good place to turn to if you're feeling stuck. From there, you'll want to start reviewing these sites one by one to start building your list of prospects. For example, if my client is in the travel niche, I'm going to look at recently published articles on sites like The Points Guy and Lonely Planet. As I read a few articles, I'm also going to check what types of pages their external links go to. On The Points Guy, I noticed that a majority of the links in their recent posts are internal links that point to other content on their website, so they may not be a link giver in the travel industry. Let's look at Lonely Planet instead. In their guide to the best beaches in New York, they link to a handful of external sites. That means that the writer is looking for other sources in my client's specific niche. And if I keep digging and notice that this writer regularly creates content about things to do in New York, I can suggest that my client focus on this content moving forward, then add this writer to my prospect list. New example. Imagine I have a client that runs a crabbing charter based in New York, and I want to create a piece of content for them that the writer from Lonely Planet may want to link to. Knowing that this author tends to link to guides, I can help my client create a comprehensive guide on crabbing in New York, and contact the writer to suggest linking to that new piece of content. Basically, doing this type of research gives you a better idea of what content is more likely to be linked to within your client's industry. As you repeat these steps and build a strong prospect list, you'll start to understand who writes content for these types of blogs and what topics they focus on. So when it comes time to reach out, you'll have a better idea of which specific people you should reach out to, what types of content they're likely to respond to, and how to draft an email that'll resonate with their interests and areas of focus. The simplest way to start identifying link givers is to analyze your client's competitors' pages and take note of which domains link to competitor sites, but not your clients. This process is called a link gap analysis. To do this, open up your client's domain in Ahrefs Site Explorer. After clicking on the search button, go to the link intersection in the left sidebar. Then add the URLs of a few of their competitors, and Ahrefs will quickly create a list of sites you might consider getting a link from in order to close that gap. From here, you'll be able to start building on your list of prospects. Another approach that I like to do is to look at the Best by Links report for a few of the competitors, also located over in the left sidebar. This helps us work backwards to see what content types have gotten the most links in the past and where those links came from. It's really important to do this for your client's specific niche because the results can vary across different industries. So that's how you can spot opportunities for new links. In the next lesson, we'll go in depth about a few common types of linkable assets that you might want to consider trying for your client. See you there. You've done your research and know where your best opportunities for links are. But now you might be looking at a long list of outreach prospects and have no idea where to start. To understand who to reach out to first, let's talk about some of the different metrics you might consider at this point in the process. In this lesson, we'll take a look at some of them at a high level, but ultimately, the metrics you will use will depend on which link building tactic makes the most sense for your client. Depending on which SEO tool you use, you might see a few different metrics at the domain level, like domain authority on Moz, domain rating on Ahrefs, authority score on SEMrush, and trust flow on Majestic. These all serve a similar purpose, indicating which domains have more authority or a better backlink profile. They can be helpful when you're narrowing down a long list of prospects, but remember that these aren't metrics that Google or other search engines use. Some websites can manipulate or even inflate these metrics, so you'll want to look at a few other metrics before making a final call. For example, in Ahrefs, you can see a website's traffic trajectory so you can avoid ones that have declining traffic or large spikes, even if their domain level metrics are high. You might also notice that sites with a high domain authority or domain rating may be news publications. If they are, keep in mind that the bar for getting featured on a site like that is very high, and they typically won't backlink to content that isn't relevant to a current newsworthy topic. If your client wants a link from these types of websites, you may want to explore digital PR, which we'll cover in another lesson. Now, at the page level, there are metrics like estimated traffic, keywords the page ranks for, and URL rating. To find those, open up Ahrefs, go to the Site Explorer, and enter the domain's URL. You can then go to the Top Pages report to find the pages on that domain that see the most organic traffic. When Google ranks a page highly, it often benefits any external links on that page. And if Google shows that page to more people, odds are that clicks on your client's link will go up too. You can also go to the Organic Keywords report in Ahrefs to see what keywords an entire domain ranks for and which pages rank for those keywords specifically. Say my client specializes in air conditioning services, and a non-competitor is ranking well for the keyword ways to keep your home cool. That tells me it can be really beneficial to get a link from that page back to my client's site. Tracking metrics like these can help you identify which pages on a domain have the most SEO value. So websites on your list that don't have a lot of traffic or aren't ranking for that many keywords can be a lower priority. Now there's one more key metric that we haven't touched on yet: relevance. Relevance to your client's niche is essential when you're looking for link opportunities, but there's no magic tool that can measure that for you. Instead, you'll need to go through your prospect list and rule out any that don't relate to your client's business. There may be some that are complementary to your client's site or have a similar audience. Like for an air conditioning services client, some complementary businesses would be other home service providers, such as plumbers and electricians. But for any sites that have barely any overlap with your clients, it's best to move them to the bottom of your list. So you've built your list of prospects and prioritized it based on your client's goals. Now it's time to get in touch. In our next lesson, we'll walk through reaching out to your prospects and talk about some common mistakes you'll want to avoid. See you there. There are two key things you'll want to keep in mind when you're creating a successful link building outreach campaign: how you prospect and the quality of your email outreach. So even if you find relevant websites and the right people to contact, if you write an email that sounds generic or too much like a template, it's safe to assume you won't get a response. So in this lesson, we'll take a closer look at how to write a good outreach email. Looking at the link givers in your client's industry or the list of sites where competitors have received links from, you can often find the right person to reach out to, since it's usually just the author of the content that the link is in. But it's always a good idea to check on LinkedIn to see whether or not that person is still working at the company and if their role has changed. You can also try looking for the content editor or manager for that site on LinkedIn. If you still can't find someone that makes sense to contact, you can always check to see if they have an SEO manager listed. They should be your next best bet. If those roles don't exist at the company, you can try reaching out to someone in their marketing department or use the Contact Us form on their website. If you still aren't able to reach someone, then I recommend skipping that site and looking into the next domain on your list. Email is the most common way to reach out and ask about getting a link. And your outreach email should always be written and sent from the perspective of your client, not as someone reaching out on a client's behalf. This will come off as more personable, genuine, and trustworthy to prospects. This email is your client's chance to make a first impression, and the first part of that is the subject line and the first sentence of the email. So let's say my client is a coffee expert that offers barista training classes. I found a local cafe that has a really active blog. After reading their content and doing some research, I think a guide on some recommended coffee and pastry pairings would perform really well on their site. Now, my goal is to help my client pitch this content idea and offer to write this piece of content for them. So first, I'll identify who manages their blog and then draft an email to them. I wrote something up. Let's review it really quickly. Hi, Mia. Thanks for sharing your cafe's secret recipe for your lava cakes. It was immediately added to my recipe collection, and I can't wait to try it. My goal up front was to come off as genuine and friendly and ultimately build rapport. While browsing through the blog, I noticed there are very few pages in the coffee section. I'm actually a certified barista trainer, and I've worked in the coffee industry for over 10 years. Perhaps I can write something for you. Then I moved on to providing value. So before writing the middle of your email, ask yourself, what can I do to help them? Or what's something they might want out of a partnership? I also highlighted my client's expertise and suggested a way that they can help them. A topic I had in mind would be to recommend different coffee and pastry pairings based on your current menu. It'll be a helpful guide for your customers, especially for those who aren't sure what to order. Since I'm sending this to the blog manager, one of her goals is probably to create unique content for her readers. So I mentioned a specific part of that audience so she knows I have her best interest in mind here too. Before we move on, I really want to emphasize how important it is that you don't copy and paste an email outreach template that you found online. Chances are, other people are using a similar template, and those emails are typically just going to be ignored. Even if you scale and create your own outreach email template, it's always good to personalize different aspects of that template for each person. As I mentioned earlier, one of the most important parts of an outreach email is the subject line. And don't be afraid to get creative. For this email, I came up with a few ideas, like the perfect brew, better latte than ever, coffee pairings for your cafe, and what's brewing. There isn't a catch-all rule for subject lines, so it's best to test different things out to see what gets the most positive responses in your client's niche or industry. Let's talk through some common mistakes you might run into when you're getting started. First, even though it seems obvious, remember that there's always another human on the receiving end of your emails. You should always be respectful and considerate of their time. You'll also want to avoid writing in a way that's too focused on your client. This email isn't a space to brag or sell your client. Instead, focus on what value your client can offer to the recipient. Next, keep it short. Some people's inboxes get hit with hundreds of emails a day. Short and succinct is always preferred, so try to aim for 200 words or less. You obviously don't want to write emails that sound like spam or harassment, but you also don't want to be too friendly before building a relationship with them. For example, you should avoid browsing their personal social media account and saying something like, I really like the outfit you wore last week. I think my husband has the same shirt in a different color. Something like that could get your client noticed for the wrong reasons. Next, not following up. Don't just send one email and forget about it. If you don't hear back after a few days, it's a good idea to send a reminder just in case they missed your initial email. A good rule of thumb is to send 1 to 2 follow-up emails, but any more than that can start to feel spammy. Don't forget to test your mail merge. If you're sending some emails in bulk for a client, you'll set up an email template in a mail merged folder, and it's really important to always send yourself a test email and review it carefully. If not, the entire campaign may end up flopping because of one typo or an issue with your template. At the end of the day, even if your client has the best resource or linkable asset on the internet, if you don't take the time to reach out, people may never find it. So it's really important to dedicate time to this step. And speaking of those resources and assets, in our next lesson, we'll talk about what makes a good linkable asset. I'll meet you there. So far in this course, we've talked about using email outreach to get backlinks, but not all link building tactics actually require outreach. Creating linkable assets is one way to naturally attract links to your client's website. But before we go any further, let's quickly recap what kind of mindset you should have when it comes to link building. First, you should have an idea of who your clients should be trying to get links from and who the link givers in their industry are. Then, you want to figure out what value your client can provide them. And lastly, there needs to be some sort of value or reason for them to want to link to your client's site. So in this lesson, we'll talk about creating linkable assets that deliver the value your prospects are looking for. Typically, when we create content for SEO purposes, the goal is to rank for certain keywords and drive traffic to a website. But you can also create content that serves other goals. Linkable assets are created with the goal of driving links to your client's website. In an earlier lesson, we talked about doing a competitor analysis to understand what some of their top pages are by links. You can do the same to analyze what linkable assets work well in your client's industry. Aside from attracting lots of links, some qualities of linkable assets are they do an exceptional job describing a certain topic, they provide new or unique information and perspectives that are often backed by data or subject matter expertise. They simplify complicated topics. It's a type of content that after someone reads it, they want to tell or share it with someone else because they found it particularly insightful or helpful. Linkable assets come in a variety of shapes and sizes. Some are very visual, like infographics, research reports, and interactive charts. This Wix blog post shows you 8 of the most common infographics you can use. There are also tools and calculators such as mortgage calculators. These are great time savers since all you do is input a few numbers and the calculator will do the rest. Lastly, the most cost-effective type of linkable asset are ones that are mostly text-based content. They can be glossary pages like this one from Wix that rounds up the most common business terms. It can also be in the form of listicles, guides, stats posts, content and resource hubs. Let's say your client's product is a project management tool. You identify that ClickUp, Asana, and Monday are a few of their key competitors. You can then open up Ahrefs, check those websites' Best by Links report, and we can get a better understanding of what types of pages have gotten the most links and what type of linkable asset they are. For ClickUp, some examples of their linkable assets include this deep dive into professional goals you can set at work, why you should set them, and tips to achieve them. They also have this 25 best task management software tools blog posts, which is a listicle, or a type of blog post that lists different tools that you can choose from. For Asana, one of their top pages by links is this research report called the Anatomy of Work Global Index, which pulls insights based on a survey they conducted. For Monday, one of their top pages by links is this glossary page that defines what is a Gantt chart, which includes example charts, the pros and cons, and alternative ways to visualize your projects. Next few lessons, we'll talk about 4 of the most common types of linkable assets that you can create. Guides, which could include things like how to walk a dog, guide to dog leashes, or how to dog-proof your home. Glossary pages, which could include pages that define terms like SEO, Core Web Vitals, and backlinks. Stats pages, which could include things like customer service stats, sales stats, or email marketing stats. Research reports, which could include things like state of remote work, best countries for digital nomads, and study of remote work and productivity. See you there. Tour guides help get you from point A to B. So when you help your client write a guide, you should both help them showcase their expertise and help their readers get from A to B on a specific topic without getting lost or confused. Another way to think about this is to take a topic and use the explain like I'm 5 approach. In other words, a guide should cleverly explain a complicated or difficult concept so that someone who's unfamiliar with the topic can understand it. One of the benefits of creating a guide over other linkable assets is because they're one of the most straightforward pieces of content to write, especially when there are chronological steps. So in this lesson, let's walk through creating a linkable guide from scratch. Let's say your client is in the wedding industry, and they tend to have a very diverse clientele with different cultural backgrounds. Since different cultures typically have their own set of customs or traditions that they follow during a wedding, you can help your client create a comprehensive guide to wedding traditions on their site. One approach is to write something like a guide to a traditional Chinese tea ceremony that lists the different supplies to prepare for a specific tradition. You or your client can do some research to make sure the guide is both accurate and comprehensive, and then publish that. The idea here is that if someone else is writing a blog post about something like how to decorate a room for a Chinese tea ceremony, and this writer comes across your client's guide, they'll find the content really insightful and helpful, so they link to it from their website. In order to create this type of guide, you'll first need to identify a topic that makes sense for your client. Discuss with them to identify any challenging scenarios or pain points that their customers face. Once you identify a topic, you can do keyword research to figure out potential subtopics and frequently ask questions that the guide should address. For the wedding client, let's look up types of weddings in Ahrefs. From here, I can see some wedding-related topics that I could create guides for, such as a guide to choosing the right wedding theme, guide to types of wedding ceremony, or guide to wedding dress codes. Let's say my client really likes the idea of creating a guide to wedding themes. I can then type in wedding themes. After clicking matching terms on the left, I can click questions, and I'll see a number of relevant questions to cover in the guide, like what are the most popular wedding themes? What are wedding anniversary themes? An exhaustive guide to all known wedding themes. When creating guides, be sure to also think about what visuals your client can include to make it even more impactful. So I might ask my client if they have access and permission to use photos of wedding flowers from any recent customers. If not, we can see if flower vendors have sample pictures that we can use instead. If those options don't work, you can consider hiring a freelance graphic designer to help you create visuals you can use in your guide. And if your client has a fresh approach on how to do something, they can include that to make their content stand out. So that's a quick overview on guides. Up next, let's look at an even more straightforward linkable asset you can help your clients create, a glossary. I'll meet you in the next lesson to go through it. Glossary pages are linkable assets you can add onto your client's site to help when someone comes across a word or phrase that they may not be familiar with. With glossary pages, the goal is to create a page for each of these terms. And within that content, your client can explain the topic in a way that's easy to understand, especially if there are already glossary pages for the term out there. From there, the goal is to get links to these glossary pages. Glossary pages typically have a lower word count than other linkable assets, but it does matter what you do with that word count. So in this lesson, we'll walk through creating one together. Let's say you have a client in the real estate industry that specializes in mortgages. There may be certain industry terms or acronyms that the average person may not be familiar with, like closing costs, bridge loans, or underwriting. For example, while a guide on bridge loans might teach the audience how to get one, a glossary page on bridge loans will just explain what they are, what they're used for, and how they compare to other types of loans. That's it. Here's a glossary page from Wix, detailing the leading business, marketing, and web design terms all professionals need to know. If we check the H2s of this page, we can see the different components of this glossary page. First is the popular business, marketing, and web design terms. The second is the discover the terms other professionals are looking for section, a H2 which introduces all the extra glossary terms not covered in the previous section. Next is the search section, which helps the user to find a glossary term by letter. Last is the email signup CTA. Your client might also write a separate guide that covers each term in more depth. For example, in this Wix glossary, if we check the e-commerce definition, we get further internal links to in-depth articles on how to set up and manage an online store on Wix, a guide to online marketplaces, how to multiply sales with multi-channel selling. Once your client writes a few different glossary pages, they can create a hub page or directory for all of them in one place. Essentially, this page should link internally to all of their glossary pages, which will be helpful for both visitors looking to learn more and for search engines to discover these pages. If, for example, there's a link to the glossary hub page from your client's navigation bar or footer, search engines can find that hub page and then find the different glossary pages just as easily. If you don't make a hub like this, your client's glossary pages may be dispersed throughout the site and will be more difficult for search engines to locate. So those are glossary pages. In our next lesson, we'll cover another type of linkable asset, statistic pages. I'll see you there. Have you ever come across an article or a blog post that starts off with a statistic? Writers like to quote stats in their content to reel readers in with a surprising fact or provide more context about the topic they're writing about. If you can help your client find, compile, and organize different stats that writers might want to use, these statistics or stat pages can also get links. In this lesson, we'll cover the specific type of listicle style content that has a higher chance of getting links. Let's say your client runs a blog about sports. Some ideas for stats pages include regional stats about where certain types of sports are conducted or turnover in sports activities by region. When brainstorming topics with your client, try to prioritize any trending or soon-to-trend topics. While working on this type of linkable asset, your client should always cite their sources in case someone wants to verify that a stat is accurate or learn more about a topic. To collect these stats, choose a topic and search for your topic plus the words study, research, findings, survey, benchmarks, metrics, trends, or case studies. You can also use Google's dataset search to identify potential datasets that you can tap into. Aside from that, a few reliable places to find stats include websites like Statista and Pew Research Center. Depending on the industry, you can also look up studies done by research firms like Gartner and IDC. You can also search industry news publications to see what surveys or research they've previously featured or cited. When you're compiling stats, it's important to find and cite the original source. Let's say you're compiling stats about video conferencing, and you find a piece of content that says 82.9% of employees believe that not all video meetings require video, but it doesn't mention who did the study. Before including the stat on your client's page, be sure to find the original source of that data, or the company that conducted the research, and verify that the stat is correct. Also, depending on the topic, you should avoid compiling stats that may be out of date. Most stats pages are typically in the form of a blog post. So here's an example of a stats page on the Wix blog, 8 Convincing Video Marketing Statistics. Most stats pages have titles similar to this one, where the total number of stats is called out right up front. Before you get to the main content, you get this linked table of contents. This kind of thing is helpful for search engines and users. If you had an even longer list of stats, it would also be helpful to group them by theme. So here we have a stat about the impact of product videos on conversion. At the tail end, you can see the source for this statistic. Another thing to note is that for your own stat pages, you can also consider having graphics for each of these sections to highlight a particular stat. This also helps break up the text and gives the reader a break. In this article, we've broken up the text with tutorials, showing you how best to implement the lessons implied by the stats. And just like other blog posts, there's usually a brief conclusion at the end of the page. So those are the key components of a stats page. What's great about these pages is that they're quite easy to create once you decide on a topic. But unlike guides and glossary pages, they're really just collections of existing content instead of something original based on your client's experience and expertise. That also means it's easy for your client's competitors to potentially replicate these pages. So you want to make sure these types of linkable assets are up to date pretty often. Luckily, the next type of linkable asset we'll go over is much harder to replicate. I'll meet you in our next lesson to talk about reports. In our last lesson, we talked about how you can compile stats from different sources to create a linkable asset. A different approach is to be the source yourself by creating research reports. The objective of research reports is to uncover interesting and unique data on a certain topic. Then, those findings can be pitched to journalists through a PR campaign or shared with others in your industry to be referenced in their own content. When done right, reports can get more high-quality links than any other linkable asset. So let's get into it. One of the easiest ways to get started is to do some homework and understand what research reports have been published before. These can be reports in your client's industry or related industries. Using remote work as our topic, let's try State of Remote Work, Remote Work Report, Remote Work Trends, and Remote Work Research. From here, you can see which research reports show up, and then use a backlink checker like Ahrefs to see whether or not the content has gotten links before. Similar to keyword research, you can also check search volumes to gauge interest in each topic. For more on keyword research, be sure to refer to that module in this course. In SEMrush, check the search volume of the same report. Try to spot any new or interesting topics that you can explore further. During the step, you can make note of the methodology used for any competitor's research reports and how their information is displayed. But first, when you're ready to start generating topics, here are a few questions you'll want to ask your client. What information would be helpful for your industry as a whole? Are there any trending topics you'd like to explore? Have you noticed any unexpected trends in your business? Are there topics that divide your industry? Once you've settled on a topic for your first research report, there are a few ways to get data. One of the most affordable options is to use existing datasets like government or census data. Next is to scrape data from existing sources like LinkedIn or Reddit, keeping in mind any regulations and restrictions they have for that data. Or, if you are able to collect and analyze usage data for your client's product, you may be able to identify unique trends and insights. A fourth way to get data is to conduct a survey based on the topic and the target audience that you're trying to reach. There are a few different platforms that can help you do market research, though it may cost a pretty penny depending on how difficult it is to reach your target audience. For example, if my client owns a job board, they can publish a research report based on job trends they've noticed on their platform. In this case, the client is analyzing their proprietary data. Or if the client doesn't have a lot of data, they can potentially scrape LinkedIn. Now, let's say I have a client that specializes in financial services. They don't have as much proprietary data to analyze, and maybe they are a relatively new business. I can work with them to design a survey that covers personal finance-related topics that haven't been researched before and explore areas that people might be curious about. However you're getting your data, the next step is to start analyzing your data to create your report. As you go through your findings, make a note of any insights that supports a common notion that did not previously have data to back up the idea, are related to something your client's audience wants to know about, which can be related to recent industry trends, are unexpected or controversial, like a stat that goes against a commonly held assumption, address pain points, concerns, or any other topics that are top of mind for a client's audience. Another approach is to imagine your client's audience is reading an industry news site. What would be potential statistics that an article headline would highlight? After compiling these interesting findings, you'll want to think about how to weave them together into a coherent story. Let's take a look at Dialpad's State of Video Conferencing as an example. The first part is the introduction to the report that goes into why Dialpad wanted to explore this topic and briefly mentions the data sources used in the research. Underneath the intro is the Key Insights section, which lists the most notable findings from the research. After that, the report goes into detail about the areas the research focused on, which are How often do we meet? Who has the most video conferences? Time spent in video conferences. Most wanted video conferencing features. And lastly, other video conferencing fun facts. Each of these are H2s on the page, which is followed by the conclusion. At the very end of the report is the methodology section, which goes into more detail about how the data was gathered. So these are the key components in a research report. Keep in mind that creating research reports require a greater investment in terms of both time and cost. It's a linkable asset that's high risk, high reward. Over the past 4 lessons, we've covered a few types of linkable assets, but I really want to emphasize that these are just a few of your options. With some competitor research, you can explore what other linkable assets or content types have worked in your niche in the past. These 4 are just some common ones that work well in almost every industry. So they're a good starting point if you're still not sure what to create. Remember that the key to any type of linkable assets success is that it adds value. The more you understand your client's audience and the link givers in their industry, the more likely you're to create assets worth linking to. Lastly, after creating linkable assets for a client, it's important to note that the work often doesn't stop after hitting publish. You should proactively outreach to relevant people from your prospect list that may find your content helpful and link-worthy, which really helps maximize the impact of these pages in the long run. But what happens if someone finds your assets and mentions them on their site without linking back to your client's site? That's what we'll cover next. Let's take a step back and recap 2 things you need to understand to create a strong link building strategy. First, how your competitors build links. This means finding out what tactics have worked in your client's industry and what pages have gotten links in the past. And second, your client's end goal. Is it awareness about your client's brand or a specific product or service? Is it to improve their rankings? Or is it to drive referral traffic? Their goal will then define what pages need links and determine what tactics you should try. So in our final few lessons, we'll talk about more ways you can put that strategy into motion, starting with how you can make the most of unlinked mentions. Unlinked mentions create an opportunity for one of the easiest backlink tactics, especially if your client's brand has a unique name. To use this method, you'll need to find mentions of your client's brand online and check whether or not the page has linked to your client. If not, try finding a page on your client's website that makes sense for them to link to and email the author of the page to see if they'd be open to adding a link. If you're using a tool like Ahrefs, you can set up an Ahrefs alert that regularly sends you an email with mentions of your client's brand. To do this, log into your Ahrefs account and click on Alerts from the navigation bar. Then go to the Mentions tab and click on the New Alert button in orange. Enter your client's brand name in the first field. In the section that allows you to exclude domains, enter your client's website URL. The remaining settings can be tweaked according to your preferences, and you'll get notified about these opportunities. If not, you also can do a search on Google for your client's brand name and exclude their website. Just search for the brand name minus site search and your brand's domain name. You don't have to limit yourself to just mentions of your client's brand name. If certain people on their team often get mentioned in the media, or if they have any branded products or features, those are also potential unlinked mention opportunities. When doing this for the first time, you can prioritize doing outreach to pages that get a high amount of traffic or websites that your client's audience reads. Also, If their brand name is sometimes misspelled, you can work on getting that edited along with adding a link to your site. So that's how you'll handle unlinked mentions in general. But there's a specific type of content you'll want to approach differently when trying to get your clients a link. Meet me in the next lesson to learn more about listicle links. When searching keywords that start with things like best or top, the SERPs often bring up listicles first. That means even if your client has a product or service that matches the criteria, it's difficult to get those pages on their site to compete. Instead, you can check the top results to see whether or not they mention your client. If they don't, you can reach out to the author and suggest adding your client to the list. This is what we call a listicle outreach. What's great about this link building tactic is that you can typically find a lot of opportunities for outreach. So let's take a closer look at how it's done. To find these listicles for your client, here is a simple formula to get you started. Modifier and product. This can look like top Bluetooth headsets or best audio equipment companies. Then, to get more specific, you can try modifier, product, and use case, like most affordable car rental for families. Or you can add a location instead, like best salon in Chicago. So if your client produces audio equipment for general consumers, you might help them look for generic listicles like top Bluetooth headsets or best audio equipment companies. But if they make high-end or more niche audio equipment, you'd want them to be mentioned in something more like DJ equipment for professionals or top AV systems for restaurants. But if, for example, your client is a local record store, you'd want to help them get a link from listicles more like top audiophile shops in San Francisco or best record stores in the Bay Area. Then, when you're ghostwriting your email outreach for your client, you'll want to highlight what makes their product unique and why it should be included on their list. Remember that there should be an objectively good reason why they should consider adding your client's site to the listicle. They need to get some value out of this too, so figure out what that might be before reaching out. For example, a weak pitch would sound generic, something that could be sent to anyone and lacks personalization. For example, "Hi, I saw you wrote a blog about the best record stores, but you didn't mention us. Can you link to us?" A better pitch would be more personalized, like, "Hi, I was really impressed that your best record store blog mentions my favorite spot. Most people have never even heard of it. I also own a thriving record store that isn't on your list. Would you consider adding it?" And lastly, a really good pitch offers some sort of value. "Hi, I was looking to promote your blog about the best record stores on our monthly newsletter, but then I noticed it doesn't mention our store. We're actually one of the oldest record stores in San Francisco and have the largest collection of indie artists. Would you consider adding us to the list? We'd be happy to add your post at the very top of our newsletter that's read by over 10,000 audiophiles." So those are the basics on listicles. In our next lesson, we'll cover another common link building strategy, broken link building. I'll see you there. Have you ever read an article and then clicked on a link only to find a 404 page? This can be really frustrating, but can actually work to your client's advantage. Whenever you spot broken backlinks going to one of their competitors' sites, you can contact the link giver and offer a working link to your client's site instead. That's the concept behind broken link building, and it's even simpler than it sounds. The first step for this tactic is to find and analyze broken backlinks to your client's competitors. To do this, just open up Ahrefs and enter the competitor's domain into the Site Explorer. On the left sidebar, click Best by Links. Then click the HTTP code drop-down menu. Select 404 not found, and then click Show Results. You'll then see a list of the competitors' broken pages that have backlinks pointing to them. No need to go hunting for them on your own. Next, you can use the Wayback Machine to see what those broken pages originally looked like. You can also check their backlinks and how other websites reference them. Here's an example. Let's say my client is a dog trainer, and after checking the broken backlinks of various sites, I found this page on Animal Shelter's site. If I click the link near the bottom of the screenshot, the one that says the definitive guide for first-time dog owners, I'll get to a 404 page. Now, I've gotten an opportunity to help my client create a guide on the same topic and write an outreach email to whoever manages the content on the Animal Shelter website. My email will let them know about their broken link and share that they can link to my client's guide instead. Then I can use Ahrefs to find all the backlinks to this broken link, and again, get more links to my client's guide. The last thing to remember here is that while you're keeping tabs on competitors' broken links, you'll also want to check to make sure your client doesn't have any broken backlinks of their own. Otherwise, competitors can take advantage of your links too. All right, so that's broken link building. Next up, we'll talk about the thing that ties all of this together, digital PR. I'll meet you there. Throughout this course, we've mentioned the term digital PR. Unlike traditional PR, which targets media sources like local newspapers, physical magazines, and TV, digital PR is focused on the web. That can include online news publications like VentureBeat or TechCrunch for the tech industry. Digital PR agencies focus on getting mentions and links from these types of websites, but you don't need an entire agency on your side to get going. In this lesson, we'll talk about how you can act as a digital PR pro for your clients. Let's get started. Unlike other link building tactics, the ultimate goal of digital PR is to get online media talking about a brand or a product. It's focused on building relationships with and pitching stories to journalists. To find relevant journalists for your client's industry, you can use paid tools like Muckrack or Prowly to tap into their journalist database. From there, you'll want to review what topics the journalist has covered recently. If they tend to report about SaaS companies, but your client is a professional services company, then they may not be a good fit. Another approach is to identify industry news publications. Check the different verticals they cover, then identify the most relevant ones, as well as the journalists that are most likely to be interested in what you have to pitch. So one big difference between digital PR and other link building tactics is who you reach out to. To effectively pitch stories to a journalist, start with an understanding of what they cover and make sure that your story is a good match. Then, if you're able to tie your pitch to something that's trending or about to trend, those pitches tend to have more weight because a journalist's job is to report about current events. Journalists report on topics that their readers would be interested in reading more about. So it's important to align your pitch to that in order for your pitch to be considered. Another unique thing about digital PR is that although it can be a way to get links, there are journalists who may mention a client's brand without actually providing a link. You should be able to spot these instances if you monitor your unlinked mentions, and you can refer to the lesson where we covered how to do that. Try to reach out to the journalist who wrote the article to see if it's possible to include a link to your client's website. But also be aware that some publications don't allow their journalists to add links. The other part of digital PR you'll want to know is called HARO, or Help a Reporter Out. If you sign up for HARO through connectively.us, you'll find a forum of journalists and other writers looking for expert quotes to use in their content. You can receive emails that'll notify you about what queries people are requesting quotes for and offer up a few quotes. And while it's not guaranteed, you may be able to get a link to your client's site if their quote is accepted, but it's ultimately up to the writer or editor. To get started, you can sign up as a source on the platform, choose your client's industry, and you'll start getting regular emails with requests to get quotes for certain topics. And when you find a prompt that someone your client can provide a quote for, you can just send it to the email address provided. But remember, even though it might benefit you, this is someone else's job. Be sure to read the prompt carefully and give your response before the deadline they give you. From there, you may need to wait a few days or weeks to see whether or not the quote is included in the final piece. Aside from HARO, you can use similar sites like Featured and Quoted. And if you have a B2B client, you can sign up for Help a B2B Writer. If your client is based in the UK, you can also monitor #journal request on X for more opportunities. Just keep in mind that it'll be harder to filter the requests by topic this way. For clients that want digital PR, SEO agencies usually refer clients to agencies or freelancers that specialize in it. So by making it a regular part of your business offering, you could eventually bring in more business in the long run. We've covered a lot so far, but there's one more link building tactic I want to show you before we wrap up. In our next lesson, we'll take a look at guest posting. I'll meet you there. Throughout this course, we've talked about one key thing to keep in mind with every link building tactic: adding value for your link givers. And one of the best ways to do that is by doing their jobs for them, literally. That's where guest posting comes in. Your client can write blog posts to be published on another company's website, and in exchange, get exposure to a whole new audience and share links to your client's product. And unlike the other link building tactics, guest posting gives you more control over which pages on your client's site gets a link. There are 4 main steps to guest posting: finding potential opportunities, doing outreach, pitching guest post topics, and writing the guest posts. Let's get into them all. If you look up how to get started with guest posting, you might see that you should search for a topic plus the keywords guest post, write for us, or contributor guidelines. And while you can find opportunities that way, a major downside is that a lot of those types of sites exist solely for link building. In other words, the content is more for search engines than it is for humans. You can learn more about Google's helpful content update to differentiate between the two. But essentially, websites that cover a random spectrum of topics or sites that just look spammy really aren't worth pursuing. Instead, I recommend reaching out to your clients' complementary businesses and partners to see if there's a potential to guest post on their blogs. The best thing about working with complementary businesses is that they tend to have a similar target audience without being in direct competition with each other. To do this, think about your client's target audience. Before they need a solution like the one your client offers, are there any other tools or services they may need? Or are there any solutions they may need alongside your clients? For example, a store that sells bicycles can collaborate with stores that sell bike shorts and other athletic gear. Other complementary businesses include bike repair stores, a professional cycling coach, gyms, or even hiking gear stores. So if I'm helping my auto dealership client find guest posting opportunities, I might reach out to local auto parts stores, auto repair shops, credit unions, car detailing companies, or car insurance companies. Let's stick with that last example. If an auto parts store is open to having my client guest post, the next step is to pitch content ideas. First, you want to see if the site you're working with has any guest posting guidelines. If they do, be sure to read them before pitching ideas. Then, I'll take a look at some of their recently published content to get an idea of what topics they like to cover and if there are any content types they like to write, such as listicles or guides. You also want to make sure you don't pitch anything they've already done. Now, I'm ready to brainstorm some guest post ideas with my client. When I'm doing this, I like to picture a Venn diagram. One circle has topics related to my client, the auto dealership, and the other circle relates to other businesses. So in this case, auto parts. Ideally, guest post topics will fall within the overlap of these two circles. So here, some of my initial ideas might be top car accessories that new car owners should buy, best air fresheners for that new car smell, 10 maintenance tips to keep your car running like new, top signs that you need to buy a new or used car. Once I have a few ideas, I'll double check that they don't already have content similar to these topics published. But if they do, and it was published several years ago, or the content is out of date, then my client can offer to help update their existing content too. After agreeing on the guest post topic, I'll work with my client to write the draft and work with our team to get the content ready to publish. When it comes to guest posting or other link building tactics, there's a fine line between what Google considers as behavior that manipulates links to your site and what's acceptable. For guest posting, this has a lot to do with your intent. You and your client's goal shouldn't just be to get links to their site. Just ask yourself, if backlinks didn't matter, would it still make sense for my client to write this post? If they're actually using their expertise to write content that's genuinely helpful to another site's blog and its audience, that's a much more valid reason to guest post. If you use spammy guest posting as a way to meet a quota for your client, you may end up doing more harm than good. You can end up associating your client's brand with spam and low quality when your guest post is on a low quality website. You also risk building links that have no positive impact on your client's SEO. When this happens, they might be hesitant to continue their relationship with your business. Lastly, the client may get hit with a manual action, which not only has a negative impact, but often takes a while to recover. Any website that relies on organic search, no matter what extent, should avoid anything that may result in a manual action. We've covered a lot about link building in this course. Meet me in the next lesson, where we'll wrap it all up together. All right, you made it to the end of the link building section of our SEO course. We started this module by exploring why link building is so important and such a necessary part of your client's overall SEO strategy. Then, we reviewed Google's guidelines on link spam to avoid raising any red flags. You learned to research how your client's industry and competitors build links and how to find out what pages those links point to. We covered email outreach and went through different types of linkable assets that your clients can benefit from. Lastly, we learned about some link building tactics that you can start out with, from unlinked mentions to guest posts. There's a lot that goes into a link building strategy, but if you follow the steps we covered and approach it with the right mindset, you have a much higher chance of seeing link building success. And no matter what link building tactics you end up using, Remember that there can be some trial and error before you figure out which tactics will work best for each client. Remember to communicate with your client and set the right expectations along the way. And once you find the right tactics, it's only onwards and upwards from there. Thanks for watching.